ways in which I can channel positive energy into my space that I really need because the world is just it's too much sometimes. You know, and I need the energy in my space to support me. So yeah, you know, I hate when people don't allow their space to be shaped by who and what they are. You know, like you go to some people's houses and you go in and you're like, oh, this is nothing. You know, this is nothing like I thought it would be because you're one kind of person, but your house is a different kind. You know, of expression. You know, so that's important, I think.
And Nicole, how did you get involved in this? So like I said, I've known you for a number of years and known you as an interior designer and a real estate person and things of that nature. So how did you get into this? And also, how is it playing in terms of the growth around the Triangle? Because the Triangle is becoming like this bustling community with all kinds of issues, some around housing and things of that nature. But how did you get involved in this, and how are you using it to shape the greater conversation?
Sure. So for me, I had done a client's house, and at the same time I was seeing a career coach, you know, helping me get to the next level. And she came to a housewarming party that I threw for my clients. And she walked in and she said, oh, my gosh, I finally get what you do for a living. All this time I thought you helped people pick out furniture and paint colors, but that's not what you do at all. You create emotional experiences. And I started thinking about it, and I'm like, you know, I've been doing design for decades, and I was never able to put words to what I do, and that's exactly what I do. I mean, I pick out furniture the way an author or a poet picks out words. Like, they're tools, but they're not what we do. We create emotions, right? And we use art to pull emotions out of other people. And I started thinking about it, and then the term emotional home came to me. And I'm like, that's it. And then I started realizing that so many people buy the wrong house. I go into people's houses and they just don't make sense for what they're looking for, or they're very difficult to lay out furniture, or they're introverts living in these open floor plan houses, but they spend all their time away from their family, hidden in their office. And started realizing that where home really begins, it starts with the house that you buy. So if I can get involved with people and counsel them as a designer looking at real estate rather than as a realtor looking at real estate, I mean, I look at it as realtors help you negotiate and they help you with the paperwork, but for the most part, every realtor is talking to you about the design of the house, so it makes more sense for a designer to be talking about the design of a house and why it works for you and to see my clients as an individual. So I wound up getting my real estate license, and then I started writing more and researching more and going in and started going down the rabbit hole of neuroscience and psychology and all this stuff. And finally I realized, you know, for me to really understand how people interact with space, I need to understand how they process information. So that led me to getting my Myers Briggs certification. And I think it's really interesting that you said a few minutes ago that you have books everywhere and stuff everywhere. And that actually is a personality to go along with that perceiving that last place. Because people that, which is the final place in the Myers Briggs type, it's a perceiving versus judgment. Very much check boxes, task lists. And we tend to be looking for more, constantly gathering more information. So we like to see stuff that we can constantly put fingers on in our mind to, right? And then realizing through all of that this is the gateway to home. It's not HGTV. It's not trends. It's not house. It's not Pinterest. It's really about who we are as individuals, and then how do we figure out how to design for ourselves as individuals and how to connect with a house that reflects us, not a retail store and not a TV show. So, yeah, I think our houses can
you bring
be
that up, but there was all those popular TV shows that tried to shape your house and everything, and I agree. A lot of times those shows didn't seem to reflect the people that were on those shows, because like I said, you would hear these, you know, these design and house shows and everything, and then you would like look at the people involved, and it's like there would seem to be a disconnect.
Right, like I didn't know so many people that I know now actually grew up on farms. Like I can't understand this whole suburban farmhouse kind of look that's so popular. You know, it's all over HGTV and Target and everything else, right? I mean, people I know didn't grow up on farms, and it doesn't reflect them, and I feel like they've got this fabulous story to tell, and they're not telling it. And I want people to – I love that minute when you walk through somebody's front door, right? You don't know what's on the other side. And the thing that makes me so happy is when I open the door and walk through, and it looks like them in this fabulous, magical, powerful way that I never expected to see. I like to be transported into their world. And I feel like, you know, if I walk into somebody's house and it looks like some popular style or trend, then I feel kind of cheated. Like, I wanted to see you, man. Like, what's going on here? So, yeah, and I feel like it plays into our psychology. It can nurture or it can work against that.
And do you think that we were talking about earlier about education, but do you think that that's also part of the education system, that in some of the ways we're not really taught to share our uniqueness, whether that's a religious uniqueness, whether that's a house uniqueness or things of that nature. But a lot of times we're encouraged to be part of this kind of like cookie cutter kind of world. You know, everybody has the same style house and the same style this. Like I said, even if we want to talk about the new growth here in Durham, to give an example, while I love the new growth, a lot of the houses that are popping up all start looking alike.
All look the same? Yep. Well, I would pull it back further than that. Like, to me, so I went to a visual performing arts high school down in Sarasota, Florida, and my school was audition only. So we didn't have lotteries down there. I had to basically show a portfolio and do some drawings on the spot to kind of get my way into the school. And I went to Ringling College of Art and Design for interior design. At the time, it was one of the top art schools in the country for interior design. But I don't think so much of it is actually, for me, is in the schools per se, per education. I think it's built into us as people, right? That we're taught that if you're different, then you're weird. And we learn at a very young age to assimilate, to be popular, to forget who we are. We don't celebrate the individual. And I feel now that we've got Gretchen Rubin and Brene Brown with Daring Greatly and all of her lectures and her Netflix show on vulnerability and being the individual and embracing who you are, that we're ready at this moment in time where we can be proud of who we are. We can discover who we are, celebrate who we are, and be proud about it, and don't feel like we have to live in the same house. And I mean, it's hard for the builders to catch up with that, right? Because they're not going to do a custom house for every person. But I think within our own homes, we have the chance and we have the opportunity to sort of take control of what the story is that we're putting out there. That's what I want to see more people do, is I want that individuality.
Yeah, and we definitely need more of that individuality. I was just wanted to hear both from you and Lama Rod, with there's being so much negative energy in both of what you're doing, both of you, whether it's Lama Rod through your practice of meditations and things of that nature, or whether it's you, Nicole, through what you're doing with houses and things of that nature. With all this negative energy that's out there, and we're hitting from the top level people that are basically putting out this energy against different elements of society, how do we combat that, and what suggestions do you give for people for combating this kind of negative energy that is being projected? I mean, like I said, every time you turn around, there's a new tweet coming from quote-unquote leadership that's talking against a group or another, whether it's xenophobia, whether it's about people's where they're from in their world, as he just recently did, going after the 4 freshman senators that are very vocal against him.
Yeah,
but I was just wondering, how do we compete against this?
You just keep going. I mean, I hate to put it as bluntly as that, but the herd doesn't like it when you break away and become an individual. And the way to beat that herd mentality is to just keep fighting, because the more people come out as strong and empowered and individual, that it tears the herd apart, because the herd can't last forever. Am I too naive in that? I might be.
I don't think so.
I feel like
Lama Rod, what do you think?
Each one of us.
I absolutely agree with Nicole. I think that for me, it's a matter of resiliency. You know, we have to we get knocked down, we have to keep getting back up again. There is, you know, this is a really intense, critical time right now where we actually have to stand up and be heard and be seen and continue to do the work, or we will lose kind of like this battle right now. You know, that we lose this battle against this resurgence of hate right now. So, and, you know, one of the things I tell people all the time in terms of how the work with everything that's happening right now. I tell people that they have to start learning how to do boundaries. You know, they need to say, you know what, I can't deal with this. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with this person. It's okay for me to say no and to refrain from certain interactions, from certain spaces, refrain from like reading certain media, refrain from social media, things like that. Like we have to start taking our energy seriously and protecting it. You know, because you know we get these texts, these tweets, you know, from you know this president, you know, and we have to learn how to like let that go and say, you know what, like I can't take this seriously because this is coming from someone who is not in tune with what is important for me. You know,
Mhm.
you know, and this is how you do it. You say no, I'm not going to deal with you. I'm not going to deal with that, but I am going to come back and reestablish myself in a sense of love that I have for myself, a sense of love that I have for my community, and let the love be what leads us into being in interaction with people. Not the anger, not the rage, but the love. You know, when we start loving each other, yeah, absolutely. You know, if we start loving each other, we're lost.
Self-love.
Yes, absolutely.
And a lot of times we don't have that self-love. A lot of times we don't have that self-love. And the other thing I wonder about, and I'm curious to hear your reflection on this, Nicole, is that sometimes we don't have the self-love, but we also pull back and try to create love of something based on what's popular. Like you said, you mentioned that you didn't know so many people were farmers, but then there's that whole back to nature movement and everything in terms of like, you know, going to Whole Foods, going into natural living and natural foods. And I'm not knocking that, but then sometimes you wonder if they're not trying to create almost like a false identity of reflecting on that, even though that wasn't necessarily their true identity. So sometimes I wonder if we don't sometimes borrow from things that are popular and trendy that don't necessarily always fall into what we're about.
Well, sometimes I think the path to individuality is a long and winding path. It's not a straight line. So I feel like if people are going on this journey and exploring certain things like, you know, different keto diets or farming and vegan and natural diets, or if they're experimenting with all these different trends, maybe this is the path to them realizing that where they started from needs a change. Maybe it's the different rooms or the different adventures that they're going on to self-discovery, and that eventually at some point in time they will find their authentic self. But it starts somewhere, and it's peeling back all of these layers that we need to be somebody else for somebody to like me, that we can't just trust ourselves and we can't just be ourselves. And I think throughout this, too, it's finding your tribe, right? Because not everybody who does these things are going to be a natural fit. I think once you start this path of self-discovery, you know, the universe starts unveiling things and revealing changes in the world and changes about you and new things going on. And I feel like we can't get to that point where we all love each other until we are able to really love ourselves and accept who we are. Because once we accept who we are, then we don't have jealousy, we don't have the insecurities, we don't have the judgment that's so clouding us right now. And I feel like that's such a big part of where we are, is that such anger that people are daring to be different, daring to be authentic, daring to be themselves, and it just doesn't mesh with the narrative that people want to take us in. Like that, it doesn't work anymore. That's what this stress is that we're feeling, is we're feeling the vanishing of the old narrative replaced by something new. And people aren't happy about that.
Yeah. And how do you do when you have this narrative going on, and I'm just curious with your housing, and I might want to hear from Laura his thoughts on this as well, but what do you do when you are consulting on a house and the people are like of different, because I know you want the house to reflect all the members. So if the house is maybe different styles, like say the house is somebody that's very pro-religion and somebody that's not as religious, or somebody that's of one faith and the other person is of another faith, or somebody's of one ethnic culture and the other person's of another ethnic culture. How do you create these houses that shape the conversation of the house, creating this dialogue, but it's sharing the dialogue of all that are in the house?
Sure. So I always have people go through and find some inspiration images of things that they like. But like you, I'm also intuitive. So I pay attention to how people interact with each other. I pay attention to how they dress and how they move and their jewelry and the colors that they wear.